Hey everyone, welcome back to D3 Reads. I'm Eric, and thanks for joining our discussion on the best horror novels. A couple weeks ago, I mentioned how we're putting together a new list on modern fantasy novels, and I'm still working on that, but it's October. You got to talk horror in October. So just a couple of weeks ago, we put out a video on the best vampire novels and stories. A few weeks before that, I shared what I thought were some of the best cosmic horror stories and novels out there. And then one of the very first videos we put together was on the best classic horror novels. Now, with all this mixed in with the many fantastic comments from viewers on these videos, we're putting together a D3R Master Horror TBR list. It'll be similar to the one that we put out for military science fiction. By the way, if you haven't seen that, if you like military science fiction and you haven't seen our Master TBR list video, check it out. I think it's a pretty good list. But on that note, if you're currently reading or have read some great horror novels that you think need to be on a TBR list and you haven't commented yet, put it down here. Tell us what you're reading. I would love to include it when we get that video finally rolled out. Anyway, as we're building this Master TBR list, I want to share with you a couple of books that I have read or am currently reading that are hands down scary and belong on any TBR. First, The Exorcist, published in 1971 and written by William Peter Blatty. Now, I told this story a few months ago on a short, one of the few shorts that we've done for this channel, but I'll tell you it here real quick. When I was in college, I was a freshman, and I had some midterm or maybe even a final coming up. And I really had to study, and I was going to pull a couple all-nighters over the weekend to study for it. I forget which class it was. It may have been Russian. Anyway, I sat down on my bed early, I think Saturday morning, Sunday, I think it was Sunday, early Sunday morning, and I was going to study my butt off until I was ready for this final. You know how college is. And as I sat down, and the moment I sat down, my eyes rolled up, and I noticed that my roommate on a little bookshelf had The Exorcist. And I thought, I've seen the movie. I wonder what the book's like. I'll take a look at the first couple of pages just to see what kind of vibe it's got. So I pulled this book down and I started reading it. And I kid you not, around midnight that night, I had finished the book. I couldn't put it down. It was absolutely engrossing and it was terrifying. It was one of the scariest books I had read or have since read. Now, if you're not familiar with it, most of us have seen the movies, I'm willing to bet, but if you haven't seen the movies and you haven't read the book, the story involved is kind of like there's two stories going on. One involves a priest who, at the beginning, and this is in the movie too, who is on an archaeological dig, and he comes across the statue of an ancient demon god named Pazuzu. Okay, that's kind of like foreshadowing. We move into the United States, where a young girl by the name of Regan has come across a Ouija board in their basement, and she starts playing around with it. Never a good thing, right? And she winds up talking with the spirit, Captain Howdy, I think its name is, kind of a ridiculous name, and that kind of lends to the parents kind of blowing it off as just like an imaginary friend. But I tell you what, as it begins to dawn that something's not right, as Regan starts to get sick, and then more and more things start to happen, it's horrifying. There are scenes in there that I want, literally, this is not a figurative use of the word literally, I mean literally gave me chills, and gives me chills just thinking about it. I mean, there are scenes in there that they're just scary as anything. And this book, I warn you, it can give you nightmares if you're bent towards that kind of thing. It is a solid horror book. I do no spoiler reviews for these, but I think it's better than the movie, personally, and it is well worth your time, and it belongs on any kind of best of list. So I highly recommend, if you're into scary books, this is it. I rate every book here on two scales: horror and quality of story. Horror, 5 out of 5 stars, and storytelling, 5 out of 5 stars as well. The book is absolutely scary, and I think is one of the best horror books I think I've ever read. So check it out. Next on the list is You Like It Darker by Stephen King. Now, this is Stephen King's latest book. It's a collection of short stories, 12 stories, I believe, ranging from brutal little short stories all the way to a couple of novellas that are in the book. Stephen King, I think, is one of the best writers out there. I personally think he went through a dry spell sometime in the 2000s, early 2000s or so. I couldn't get through some of his work, or I found it kind of repetitive, and I found his endings were kind of getting weak. But I, for some reason, was excited about this book, and I tell you, it's got some of the best work I think he's done here in years. It's some of his freshest work. And some of the stories I think have appeared in earlier publications, like maybe on his website, maybe I think in a couple magazines. But a lot of the stuff is fresh and new. Again, no spoilers, but I will say that I want to make a couple of points. Number one is the first story is a novella that's never been published before called Two Lucky Bastards, and it is a well-written, engrossing book or engrossing story, and you want to read it, but it's not the scariest story that Stephen King's ever written. It's not meant to be. It's a little bit more maybe thought-provoking, I guess. But I want if you read it, you won't regret reading it. But because I'm recommending horror, I don't want you to think. I don't want you, if you decide to read this book, to read this first story and think, this is not really very scary. It's not. There's much more terrifying stories in this book. I will tell you, of the stories in here, my favorites, I think I have 4 there that I particularly love. Now remember, I do spoiler-free reviews here, but of the 12 stories in this book, my 4 favorites are Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream, Rattlesnakes, The Dreamers, and The Answer Man. These 4 some of them are just, I think, got some incredibly horrific scenes in there. Some are extremely thought-provoking, profound, and I think these have kind of jumped up to some of my favorite Stephen King stories ever. And Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream, I thought was just really, it was a good mix of horror and classic Stephen King type horror and great storytelling. So all averaged together, would say that this collection of short stories on a horror scale, 4 stars, because again, Stephen King goes down different paths. And some of his work isn't meant to be, just keep you up all night, scary, just thought-provoking and creepy at the same time. So 4 out of 5 stars for horror, 5 out of 5 for story, because again, he's one of the modern masters of writing, I think, and definitely recommend it. And finally, the last book I want to touch on is The Historian, published in 2005 and written by Elizabeth Kostova. This book, if you saw the video on Best Vampire Stories, I mentioned it as an honorable mention at the end of that one because I hadn't finished it. Well, I still haven't finished it, but it's not because I'm having trouble with it. It's because I had to go out of town last week and I didn't get a whole lot of reading time, but I'm savoring it. I'm also a slow reader, I gotta be honest, but this book is engrossing. It is so smart and so well written. It's not Exorcist level scary. It's not Salem's Lot level scary, but it is brainy, and it unfurls a mystery throughout this that is engaging and got plenty of solid, creepy moments. For those of you who are wondering, it is a vampire story, and it involves none other than Vlad Dracula. It's really neat the way Kostova does this, because a story dealing with Dracula, dealing with fairly modern. The story kind of starts in the 70s and then goes back and forth in time through letters and books and that kind of thing. But it could easily be campy and or ridiculous. But she does a great job of this. Basically, the main character is the daughter of an academic. He's actually a diplomat, an American diplomat living in Europe. He has his own foundation that helps try to promote peace during the Cold War. And the daughter comes across this book in her father's library. It's totally blank except for the middle couple pages, which has nothing but a drawing of a dragon. It's very creepy to her. And when she asks about this, she inadvertently opens the gates and finds out that her father's been embroiled in this mystery dealing with Vlad Dracula that's lasted centuries. We get to see the story unfold through his stories, through his letters, through his mentor's letters, and we find that this has been going on for quite some time. I'm halfway through with the book, but it's so good that I have no trouble recommending it to you as something to read for Halloween, especially if you're not into the lose sleep kind of scary books, but you want something that's just smart and spooky and definitely in the Halloween spirit. So the Historian, I'm just enjoying it. I can't wait to finish it. I will finish it by Halloween as we wrap up the whole spooky season with our official D3 Master TBR list. So that's it. Thanks so much for joining us. What are you reading right now? Are you reading anything scary? Let us know. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Have a great Halloween, and we'll see you next time.